Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing another one of my 360 book reviews, this time about the book The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. So Hallie Rubenhold is a historian. She has a very long track record of writing books in history, specifically looking at the Victorian era, and this is her latest book, which is looking at the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, specifically their lives rather than the Ripper case in general. So we're following the lives of the 5 women who are Polly, Annie, Elizabeth, Kat and Mary Jane. And the reason why I'm saying their names here now is the whole point to this book is that it's trying to give an identity back to the women who become nothing more than victims and numbers and statistics to prop up the mythology of the infamous Jack the Ripper. This book literally follows the lives of these 5 women. The book is broken into 5 different sections, starting with his first victim Polly and going all the way through to his last victim Mary Jane, and we look at them from their childhood all the way through to the moment of their final night. One of the reasons why I really enjoy this book so much is it uses these 5 women as like a jumping off point to look at what the typical working class lifestyle would have been within the Victorian era, and it does it in such a way that means that you can explore the various pressures that were put on women in Victorian society. Now the reason why Hallie Rubenhold wanted to write this book is because it has just been kind of accepted and understood in the Jack the Ripper mythology that he was a prostitute killer and that all 5 of his victims were definitely prostitutes who regularly solicited for sex. However, when you go back and look at the records, it is not very likely that they actually were prostitutes. Only one of them was like a regular prostitute and one other one had solicited for sex at some point in her life, but there's no evidence she was doing it at the time of her death. And the whole point of this is that the book is looking at the typical lifestyle of the Victorian woman and whether it is likely that they would have actually been prostitutes or not, these particular victims, or whether it was just that the ideals of the Victorian society that placed so much pressure on women meant that if you didn't conform to these kind of standards, it meant that you were considered as good as prostitutes even if you'd never personally solicited for sex. Now this book is very careful to not make any particularly clear statements in terms of like we definitely have evidence for this or for that, because basically there is so much information that's been lost over the years and so much of what was happening around the time in the press and what we have to rely on was basically speculation and kind of running with facts and grandiosing things and jazzing them up for the media. But instead what Hallie's doing is she's looking at their life beforehand and then how much we can know about what was going on around the time of their death, and then from that basically stating that we can't infer that they are prostitutes, but so because basically like innocent until proven guilty kind of. With this being said, it is also a book that is avoiding any major judgments on whether they were prostitutes or not. For example, one of Jack the Ripper's victims definitely was. Mary Jane, his last victim, had a known long history of being a working woman who was paid for sex, both in terms of being quite high up in brothels and then also more on the like classic street corner view, and at no point has Hallie laden this with any judgments. The whole point is that these are women who have an identity and are human beings in their own right and should not just be reduced down to one of 5 of the Jack the Ripper's infamous murdering spree. It's unbelievably well researched. You can so tell that Hallie has spent her time on it and has earned all of her credentials as being a historian. It's absolutely amazing for that in that way, and she uses this book to kind of be a jumping off point to discuss the weird sort of idolization that serial killers end up having in the press, and the fact that our cultural obsession with serial killers as these kind of infamous, terrifying creatures who kind of are outside of social norms and often get given this kind of genius status. You know, Jack the Ripper has never been caught. He's the infamous dark shadow in the night, and the fact that we know the names of people like Ed Kemper and Ted Bundy, but I can't tell you any of their victims to save my life. And the obsession with serial killer documentaries and retellings and books and true crime, rather than actually looking at the victims themselves and the fact that these are people and none of them deserve to die. So this book is trying to draw that focus back onto the women rather than on Jack the Ripper as being this, you know, mythological figure of like the ultimate sort of like the ultimate serial killer basically. Some of the cons of this book potentially are going to be that it is a little bit repetitive in places. Naturally these women do have in places quite similar lifestyles. Whilst they started at very different points, they all ended up basically in doss houses, living on the street rough, and because of that, quite often they fell into drink, which means that it does become a little bit repetitive towards the end of each of their stories. So that's just something to watch out for. I've heard criticism in some of the other reviews about it. I personally didn't mind at all, but it's something to bear in mind. Also, if you are looking for a story like details about the Jack the Ripper case, you are going to be sorely disappointed. At no point does this book particularly go into it. It doesn't even really detail what happened to these women at all. It is about them, not him. So if you are looking for a Jack the Ripper book, go read one of the thousands that are already out there. This is about the 5. That's why they're in the title. I personally absolutely adore this book. I listened to it on audiobook, and I think the narrator was very good at putting in the right amount of emotion but keeping it also clean when she needed to, and very kind of proper and precise when she needed to. There was also some really lovely addition of music, so that's something to bear in mind as well. I definitely recommend the audiobook for this one, and I adored it. I finished it in 2 days. I finished it last night. This is the closest I've done a review to finishing a book because I just had to talk about it. I think it's fantastic. So I'm definitely going to go check out more of Hallie Rubenhold's books in the future, and I would really recommend that you read this book if you are interested in the Victorian era history, true crime, anything like that. Or if you just want to honour these women in the way that they should have been honoured when they first died, then I would definitely recommend reading this book. So that's it from me. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!